She needs confidence more than you need college, my father said, not even looking up from his newspaper as he informed me that my $150,000 MIT fund had been transferred to my sister for plastic surgery. My name is Michael Peterson, I'm 25 years old, and I was supposed to start my computer science degree at MIT in the fall. Instead, I was standing in our family kitchen in Westchester County, New York, listening to my parents explain how my future had been sacrificed for my sister's nose job. My mother, Patricia, nodded in agreement from her position at the marble countertop. Madison has been so insecure about her appearance. This will change her life. She said it like she was discussing the weather, as if 18 years of my academic achievements meant nothing compared to my 23-year-old sister's cosmetic concerns. I just nodded once and said, I understand. What they didn't understand was that I'd been preparing for this possibility for months. My parents, David and Patricia Peterson, had built their fortune through Peterson Development, a luxury real estate company specializing in high-end residential properties throughout Westchester and Fairfield counties. They'd always made it clear that Madison was their favorite, the beautiful socially connected daughter who could marry well and maintain their social status. I was the quiet, studious son who spent weekends coding instead of networking at country club events. The signs had been there for months. Hushed conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. Madison's sudden enthusiasm about investing in herself. My parents' new reluctance to discuss my college plans, despite my acceptance to MIT with a partial scholarship that still required $150,000 in family contributions. I'd started documenting everything 6 months earlier when I overheard my mother on the phone. MIT is just too expensive, and honestly, Michael can go to community college and transfer later. Madison's needs are more immediate. That night, I opened my own savings account at a different bank and began funneling money from my part-time web development work. I also started making copies of financial documents I found around the house, including the trust fund papers that showed the college money had been set aside specifically for my education. When the moment came, I was ready. So what's your plan now? Madison asked, walking into the kitchen in her designer workout. Clothes clearly already informed about the decision. Community college? She didn't try to hide her smirk. Something like that, I replied, maintaining the same calm tone I'd used with our parents. What none of them knew was that I'd been accepted to the University of Rochester with a full scholarship for students from low-income families. I'd qualified by filing my own tax returns separately and demonstrating financial independence. The MIT fund had never been legally accessible to me anyway. It was in my parents' names, despite their promises. But I had something else they didn't know about. For 3 years, I'd been running a small web development company called Microtech Solutions. What started as building websites for local businesses had grown into something more substantial. By my senior year of high school, I was managing 12 employees, mostly freelancers, and generating approximately $300,000 in annual revenue. My parents never paid attention to my computer hobby, assuming I was just playing games in my room. In reality, I was building the foundation for everything that would come next. The morning after they broke the news about MIT, I drove to Rochester and enrolled at the University of Rochester's computer science program. I told my parents I'd decided to take a gap year to figure things out, which seemed to relieve them. They wouldn't have to explain to their social circle why their son was attending a state school instead of an Ivy League institution. I moved into a small apartment near campus using money from Microtech Solutions. My parents barely noticed I was gone, too focused on Madison's upcoming surgery consultations and recovery planning. At Rochester, I thrived. The computer science program was excellent, and without the pressure of my parents' expectations, I could focus entirely on learning and growing my business. I took advanced courses in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and cybersecurity. Meanwhile, Microtech Solutions continued expanding. By my sophomore year, I'd secured contracts with 3 major regional hospitals to modernize their patient management systems. The company was generating over $800,000 annually, and I'd hired 6 full-time employees plus a dozen contractors. I kept my success private, maintaining the fiction with my parents that I was struggling in community college and working part-time at a computer repair shop. They seemed satisfied with this narrative, occasionally sending small amounts of money to help out while focusing their attention and resources on Madison's modeling career aspirations. Madison's surgery had gone well, and she'd parlayed her new look into a modest social media following and some local modeling gigs. Our parents were thrilled, constantly posting about her achievements on their own social accounts and introducing her to potential business connections. During holiday visits, I played the role of the underachieving son who'd made peace with his circumstances. Madison would joke about how lucky she was to have received the smart money, while I'd gotten stuck with student loans. My parents would laugh and suggest I should be grateful that my sister was representing the family so well. I just nodded and kept building. By my junior year, Microtech Solutions had caught the attention of larger firms. We'd developed a proprietary patient data management system that was being used by 14 hospitals across 3 states. Annual revenue had reached $2.1 million, and I'd started receiving acquisition offers from major tech companies. I also started receiving other kinds of offers. Mr. Peterson, the voice on my office phone belonged to Rebecca Martinez, a senior partner at Crawford Williams & Associates, one of the region's largest law firms. I represent First National Bank of Westchester. We have a situation that might interest you. It turned out my parents' real estate empire wasn't as solid as it appeared. Peterson Development had been operating on increasingly thin margins for 2 years, taking on larger projects with borrowed money and hoping to flip properties quickly. The luxury real estate market had cooled, leaving them holding expensive inventory they couldn't move. They'd borrowed against everything, including their primary residence, the house where I'd grown up, worth approximately $1.8 million. Recent missed payments had triggered a foreclosure process that would play out over the next 18 months. The bank is always interested in working with qualified buyers who can close quickly, Rebecca explained carefully. If someone were to acquire the debt, they could potentially restructure or accelerate the foreclosure process. I thanked her for the information and hung up. That evening, I called my business partner and CFO, Janet Chen, who'd joined Microtech Solutions after graduating from Wharton. Janet, I need you to run some numbers on a real estate acquisition. The analysis was straightforward. Peterson Development owed $2.3 million to First National Bank, secured by their house and several investment properties. The total value of the collateral was approximately $4.1 million, but in a foreclosure scenario, the bank would likely accept significantly less to avoid the costs and delays of a public auction. I could acquire the entire debt package for roughly $1.8 million, giving me control over my parents' financial future. Are you sure about this? Janet asked when I explained the personal connection. Mixing business with family can get complicated. This isn't about family, I replied. This is about business and consequences. The acquisition took 6 months to complete. I used a shell company called Northeastern Investment Holdings to purchase the debt package from First National Bank. My parents never knew the identity of their new creditor, only that their loans had been sold to a private investment firm. I restructured the payment schedule, actually giving them slightly more favorable terms initially. I wanted them comfortable, confident that they'd weathered their financial difficulties. During this period, I completed my degree at Rochester with a 3.97 GPA and graduated summa cum laude. Microtech Solutions had grown to 37 employees and was generating $4.2 million annually. We'd received a buyout offer from Amazon Web Services for $47 million, which I accepted. At 25, I was worth approximately $31 million after taxes and employee profit sharing. My parents didn't attend my college graduation. They were in Milan with Madison, who was pursuing international modeling opportunities. They sent a card. The foreclosure notice was delivered on a Tuesday morning in March, exactly 7 years after they'd given my MIT fund to Madison. I was in my corner office at Microsoft, where I'd accepted a position as principal software engineer after selling Microtech Solutions, when my phone rang. Michael? My father's voice was strained, panicked. Something terrible has happened. Our house is being foreclosed. The investment company that holds our loans is demanding immediate payment of the full balance, over $2 million. I set down my coffee and opened the legal documents on my computer. That's terrible, Dad. What are you going to do? We're trying to negotiate, but they're not returning our calls. We have 48 hours to pay in full or vacate the property. His voice broke slightly. Michael, I know college didn't work out the way we planned, but is there any way you could help? Maybe co-sign a loan or something? I thought about 18-year-old me, standing in that kitchen, being told my future was worth less than Madison's cosmetic surgery. I wish I could help, I said carefully, but I'm still paying off my own student loans from community college. You know how it is. Of course, I just thought maybe your computer repair job had turned into something more. Still fixing computers, I confirmed. Same as always. After he hung up, I opened my laptop and drafted an email to the property management company I'd hired to handle the foreclosure process. The house would be sold to the highest bidder at public auction in 2 weeks. I instructed them to ensure all legal procedures were followed precisely. I also called my real estate attorney to discuss purchase options. The house sold for $1.9 million to the sole bidder at auction, a company called Peterson Holdings LLC, which I'd established specifically for this purchase. My parents had 48 hours to collect their belongings and vacate the property where they'd raised their children and built their social standing. I drove by the house on moving day, watching from down the street, as my parents supervised the loading of trucks. Madison was there too, looking stunned and angry, directing movers with sharp gestures. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. The new owner is some tech company. They bought it as an investment property. 40 years in this house and we get 48 hours to leave. I replied, I'm sorry to hear that. These investment companies can be ruthless. What I didn't tell them was that I'd offered them the option to remain as tenants. At a below-market rent of $8,000 per month, they'd declined, apparently finding the idea of renting their former home too humiliating. Instead, they moved into a modest rental in a less prestigious neighborhood. Peterson Development dissolved 6 months later, unable to recover from the foreclosure and the loss of their primary asset. I heard through mutual acquaintances that my father had taken a sales position with a commercial real estate firm. My mother was working part-time at an interior design company. Madison's modeling career had stalled and she'd moved back home to help with expenses. I renovated the house extensively, updating the kitchen where I'd learned my college fund had been redistributed, converting my old bedroom into a home office and adding a state-of-the-art home theater in the basement. The work took 8 months. When it was finished, I hosted a housewarming party for my colleagues from Microsoft and former employees from Microtech Solutions. One of my former programmers, Dave Kim, looked around the expansive living room and asked, "How did you afford a place like this on a tech salary?" I smiled and raised my glass. 7 years of careful planning. 6 months after the housewarming, I received an unexpected visitor. I was working in my home office when the doorbell rang. Through the security camera, I saw my father standing on the front porch, looking older and smaller than I remembered. I answered the door, genuinely surprised. "Dad, how did you know I lived here?" He looked past me into the foyer, recognition dawning slowly. "I don't understand. This is our house. How are you? What are you doing here?" "I live here," I said simply. "I bought it last year." His face went through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, and finally, a growing understanding. "You bought it. You bought our house." "Yes." "How?" "You work at a computer repair shop. You never even finished college." "Properly." I stepped aside and gestured for him to come in. He entered slowly, looking around at the renovated space with the expression of someone visiting a familiar place in a dream. "I did finish college," I said, leading him to the living room. "University of Rochester, computer science degree. Graduated summa cum laude. I also built and sold a tech company for $47 million. He sat heavily in one of the new leather chairs staring at me. "That's impossible. We would have known. You would have known if you'd paid attention to anything in my life besides Madison's modeling photos." We sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, he asked, "Why didn't you tell us?" "When?" I replied. "When you were explaining that Madison's self-esteem was more important than my education? When you were laughing about how lucky she was to get the smart money? When you forgot to attend my college graduation because you were in Milan?" His face crumpled. "Michael, we made mistakes. But buying our house, forcing us out, that's cruel." I leaned forward, maintaining eye contact. "I didn't force you out. I offered you market rate rent to stay. You chose to leave because your pride was more important than your home. Market rate? $8,000 a month, we couldn't afford that. Madison spent $6,000 on a purse last year," I replied. "I saw the Instagram post. You've funded her lifestyle for 7 years while she pretended to be a model. $8,000 a month for a house worth $2 million was generous." He stood up, anger replacing the shock. "So this is all revenge? Destroying your family because you're bitter about college? I didn't destroy anything, I said calmly. You built your empire on borrowed money and bad decisions. I just happened to be in a position to benefit when it collapsed. But you're our son. Yes, I agreed. I'm the son who you thought needed college less than Madison needed a nose job. I'm the son whose achievements you never celebrated because they didn't fit your social aspirations. I'm the son you ignored while investing everything in the daughter who's now 28 and financially dependent on parents who can't afford her lifestyle. I walked to the window and looked out at the garden my mother had once tended. I offered you help, Dad. Not money, but opportunity. A place to live while you rebuilt. You chose pride over practicality. When I turned around, he was crying quietly. What do you want from us? He asked. Nothing, I replied honestly. I wanted you to understand consequences. You taught me that family loyalty goes only one direction, toward the person who brings you the most social value. I learned that lesson well. He left without another word. 3 months later, I received a letter from Madison. The envelope was expensive stationery, her handwriting still the careful cursive she'd learned at private school. Michael, Dad told me about your conversation. I want you to know that I never asked for the college money. I thought there was enough for both of us. I'm sorry we didn't do better as a family. I'm sorry I didn't see how much Mom and Dad's choices hurt you. I know you probably don't want a relationship with any of us anymore, but I wanted to say that I'm proud of what you've built. I always knew you were the smartest person in our family. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Madison. I read the letter twice, then filed it away without responding. 2 years passed. My career at Microsoft flourished, and I was promoted to distinguished engineer, leading a team developing next-generation cloud infrastructure. I dated occasionally, but found it difficult to trust people's motivations when they learned about my financial situation. The house felt less like a victory, and more like a very expensive symbol of a childhood I couldn't quite let go of. One evening, while working late in my home office, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Michael, this is Rebecca Martinez, the attorney who connected you at the bank about your parents' house. I remembered her. Yes, what can I do for you? I'm calling because your sister Madison contacted my office. She's trying to understand the legal process that led to your family losing their home. She seems to think there might have been some impropriety. I set down my pen, and I explained that everything was handled according to standard foreclosure procedures, but she asked me to give you a message. What message? She said to tell you that your father had a heart attack last week. He's stable, but she thought you should know. After Rebecca hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, looking at the family photos I'd found in storage and never displayed. The next morning, I drove to Westchester Medical Center. My father was in a private room, connected to monitors but conscious and alert. He looked smaller in the hospital bed, older than his 63 years. Michael, he seemed genuinely surprised to see me. Madison said she was trying to reach you, but we didn't know if... How are you feeling? Better. Doctor says it was stress-related, not a massive attack, but a warning. He shifted uncomfortably. I've been thinking about what you said, about consequences. I pulled a chair next to his bed. Dad, I didn't come here to relitigate the past. No, let me say this. He struggled to sit up straighter. You were right. About everything. Madison's lifestyle, our priorities, the way we treated your achievements. Your mother and I, we got caught up in appearances, in what we thought success looked like. Where is Mom? Coffee shop downstairs with Madison. They'll be back soon. He paused. Michael, I need to ask you something, and I want you to tell me the truth. I nodded. When you bought our house, was it because you wanted to hurt us or because you wanted us to finally see who you really are? I considered the question carefully. Honestly? Both. He nodded slowly. That's fair. That's probably the most honest anyone in our family has been in years. The door opened and my mother and Madison entered, stopping short when they saw me. Michael, my mother whispered, her voice uncertain. Mom. Madison looked between our father and me, clearly trying to read the situation. She'd lost. Wait, looked more mature than the self-absorbed 20-something I remembered. How are you, Madison? I asked. I'm good. Different but good. She sat in the chair across from me. I got a job, teaching at a community center in Mount Vernon. Art classes for kids. That sounds fulfilling. It is. It's nothing like what I thought I wanted, but it's real. My mother remained standing by the door, unsure of her welcome. Michael, I owe you an apology. Several apologies. We failed you as parents. Mom, no, let me finish. Her voice was firmer now. We treated you like your success was inevitable, and Madison's was fragile. We invested in what we thought needed help, and took for granted what was already strong. That was wrong. I looked around at my family, really seeing them for the first time in years, not as the people who'd betrayed me, not as obstacles to overcome, but as flawed humans who'd made terrible decisions and were trying to understand the consequences. I've been thinking, I said slowly, about what I actually wanted from all of this. And, my father asked, I wanted you to see me, not as an extension of your ambitions or a backup plan for Madison's success, but as your son who had his own dreams and his own worth. We see you, Madison said quietly. Finally, we see you. 6 months later, my father was back to full health, working as a project manager for a mid-sized development firm. My mother had started her own interior design consultancy, working primarily with middle-income families, rather than the luxury clients she'd once pursued. Madison had enrolled in art education classes at a local college, funded by her teaching salary and small student loans. I helped them find a better rental house, nothing extravagant but comfortable and in a good neighborhood. When my father protested that he couldn't accept help from me, I reminded him that this was business. I'd purchased the house as a rental property, and they were paying market-rate rent. We had dinner once a month, always at restaurants, neutral territory where we could be the people we were becoming rather than the family we used to be. One evening, as we were finishing dessert at a small Italian place near their new home, Madison asked, "Do you ever regret it? The way everything played out?" I thought about 18-year-old me, standing in that kitchen, being told my future was expendable. I thought about the years of work, the careful planning, the moment I'd stood in my childhood home as its new owner. No, I said honestly. I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret the outcome. What would you have done differently? My mother asked. I would have trusted you with the truth earlier. I spent so much energy hiding my success because I assumed you'd try to take credit for it or find a way to give it to Madison instead. Would we have? My father asked. Probably, Madison answered before I could. Let's be honest. You would have found a way to make it about the family name or social connections. You would have turned Michael's company into networking opportunities. My parents exchanged a look, the kind that passes between people who've learned uncomfortable truths about themselves. We're proud of you, my mother said finally. Not just your success, but who you became despite our mistakes. I'm proud of us, I replied. All of us, for figuring out how to be a family again. As I drove home that night to my house, the house that had once been theirs, that had been the symbol of everything wrong between us and was now simply the place where I lived, I realized that revenge had never really been the point. The point had been recognition, respect, the acknowledgement that I had value beyond my utility to other people's dreams. I'd gotten that finally, and surprisingly, it had been worth the wait. But I kept the house. Some symbols are too expensive to give up, and besides, I'd earned it. Every morning when I made coffee in the kitchen where I'd learned that Madison's confidence was worth more than my education, I was reminded not of what they'd taken from me, but of what I'd built despite them. And that, I thought, was the best revenge of all. Living well, on my own terms, in a space I'd reclaimed entirely through my own merit. The foundation they'd tried to deny me had become the bedrock of everything I'd achieved. Some lessons are expensive, but the ones that stick, the ones that change how we see ourselves and our place in the world, those are always worth the price.